I sat frozen, afraid to move. Stellan rested his head against my shoulder as if he had known me for years. Around us, the staff stared in complete disbelief. One of the maids even dropped a tray she was carrying. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then I heard someone whisper, "That's never happened before." I didn't know what they meant, but I could feel every pair of eyes on me. A few moments later, a tall man entered the room. I recognized him immediately from the photos hanging throughout the mansion. It was Ronan Thorne. His attention went straight to his son. Stellan usually threw tantrums whenever strangers got too close, but this time he stayed calm. He wrapped his small arms around my neck and refused to let go. Ronan looked surprised. "Why is he sitting with her?" he asked. No one seemed to have an answer. The house manager finally cleared her throat and explained what had happened. Ronan watched us carefully, almost like he was trying to solve a puzzle. For the rest of the afternoon, Stellan followed me everywhere. When I folded laundry, he sat nearby. When I cleaned the library, he carried books behind me. When I went to the kitchen, he pulled a chair over and sat beside me. I expected someone to stop him, but nobody did. Later that evening, I helped prepare his dinner. The cooks warned me that mealtime was usually a disaster. They said he often screamed, threw food, and refused to eat. Instead, he quietly sat at the table. He finished nearly everything on his plate. The kitchen staff exchanged shocked looks. As I cleaned up afterward, I noticed something strange. For the first time since arriving at the estate, several employees were smiling at me. But not everyone looked happy. Across the room, a woman stood watching me. Her expression was cold. The moment our eyes met, she turned and walked away without saying a word. Something about that look made my stomach tighten. I had a feeling my problems inside this mansion were only beginning. The next few weeks felt strange. I had worked many jobs before, but I had never seen a child become attached to someone so quickly. Every morning, Stellan would come looking for me before anyone else. If he couldn't find me, he would search the hallways until he did. Because of him, many people in the mansion started treating me differently. Staff members who barely noticed me before now greeted me warmly. Some even joked that I was the only person who had ever figured out Stellan's mysterious personality. But Celeste's behavior grew worse. Whenever we were alone, her smile disappeared. One afternoon, while I was arranging flowers in the dining room, she walked by and looked me up and down. "You should be grateful you're here," she said coldly. "Women like you don't usually get opportunities like this." I kept quiet and continued working. That seemed to annoy her even more. A few days later, I found several mistakes written on my work report. Tasks I had completed perfectly were marked as unfinished. The complaints had come directly from Celeste. The house manager privately admitted that the accusations made no sense, but nobody was willing to challenge Ronan's future wife. Then I began noticing something that bothered me deeply. Whenever Celeste entered a room, Stellan's entire mood changed. One evening, we were building towers with toy blocks in the playroom. He was laughing and having fun. The second Celeste walked through the door, he stopped smiling. His small hands started shaking. He slowly moved closer to me and hid behind my chair. Celeste noticed, but acted as if nothing had happened. After she left, I gently asked Stellan if he was okay. He didn't answer. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me and stayed silent. The fear in his eyes stayed with me all night. Something was wrong. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Celeste wasn't simply jealous of me. She was afraid of something. A few days after that, I stayed late cleaning one of the smaller sitting rooms near Ronan's private office area. Most of the staff avoided that section of the mansion unless they were specifically assigned there. As I carried a box of old files down the hallway, I heard raised voices coming from a room nearby. At first, I planned to keep walking. Then I heard Celeste's voice. She sounded angry. Curious, I slowed down. The door wasn't completely closed, and a few words drifted into the hallway. I heard Merrick Hale mention paperwork that should have remained hidden. Celeste replied that certain records had already disappeared and nobody would ever find them. Then I heard Lark's name. My heart skipped. The conversation stopped suddenly. A chair scraped across the floor. Before I could move away, the door opened. Both of them stared directly at me. For a second, nobody spoke. I quickly apologized and claimed I was only passing through. Merritt gave me a long look that made me uncomfortable. Celeste's expression was even worse. She looked nervous. That was the first time I had ever seen her lose control. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast trays, Odessa quietly approached me in the kitchen. She glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. Then she asked if I had ever wondered what really happened to Larkthorn. I nodded. Odessa lowered her voice. She said many long-time employees never believed the official story. According to her, questions had been ignored, records had disappeared, and people who asked too many questions often left the estate soon afterward. Before she could explain further, another employee entered the kitchen. Odessa immediately changed the subject. The following day, she was gone. No woodbye, no retirement party, nothing. Staff members whispered about it all day, but nobody received an explanation. That was when fear settled into my stomach. The people connected to these secrets weren't simply protecting family business. They were removing anyone who got too close. And somehow, I'd already gotten too close. After Odessa disappeared, the atmosphere inside the mansion changed completely. People who used to talk with me every day suddenly became distant. Conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. Some employees avoided looking at me altogether. At first, I didn't understand why. Then the accusations started. A valuable bracelet belonging to a guest went missing during a dinner party. 2 days later, it was found inside a drawer in my room. I was shocked. I knew I had never touched it. The house manager looked confused, but the damage was done. Rumors spread quickly throughout the estate. Not long after that, money supposedly disappeared from a household account. Once again, people somehow connected it to me. I felt trapped. No matter what happened, fingers pointed in my direction. The worst part was watching people I trusted slowly turn against me. Some refused to sit with me during meals. Others acted as if I were dangerous. I tried defending myself, but nobody wanted to hear it. Then everything got worse. One afternoon, Ronan called me into his office. Several people were already waiting inside. A security screen showed footage from one of the mansion cameras. I watched in disbelief as the video appeared to show me taking something from a locked cabinet. My heart pounded. I didn't do that, I said immediately. Nobody responded. I kept explaining, but the room had already decided my guilt. Ronan's face was cold. The trust that had once existed between us was gone. Within minutes, I was told to leave the estate. I returned to my room and packed my belongings through tears. When Stellan realized what was happening, he ran to me. He wrapped himself around my leg and refused to let go. His cries echoed through the hallway. Even now, I can still hear them. Leaving him behind hurt more than losing the job. As my car pulled away from the gates, I looked back at the mansion one final time. Someone had destroyed my life, and someday I was going to prove exactly who had done it. The weeks after I left the estate were difficult. I moved into a small apartment and worked temporary cleaning jobs just to cover rent and groceries. Some nights I barely slept because I kept thinking about Stellan. Then one evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Odessa's voice. I couldn't believe it. She explained that she had stayed quiet because she was afraid. After losing her job, she realized things had become too dangerous to ignore. A few days later, we met in a small coffee shop far from the estate. Odessa brought several folders filled with documents she had secretly copied over the years. At first, I thought the papers would only help prove that I had been framed. I was wrong. The information revealed something much bigger. Together, we spent days reviewing records, comparing dates, signatures, and financial transactions. The more we looked, the more suspicious everything became. Certain signatures didn't match official records. Money moved through multiple companies before disappearing. Important files were incomplete. Some pages were missing entirely. Odessa showed me reports that should have existed but couldn't be found anywhere. Statements from former employees had vanished. Documents connected to Lark's final days contained strange changes and corrections. Nothing looked normal. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture started forming. This wasn't random corruption. Someone had been carefully changing records for years. Every trail seemed to lead back to people connected to Celeste. I remembered the way Stellan reacted whenever she entered a room. I remembered Odessa's warning. I remembered being pushed out the moment I started asking questions. Suddenly, everything made sense. The theft accusations against me were never the real goal. Removing me had simply protected a much larger secret. For the first time, my anger disappeared. What replaced it was determination. This was no longer about getting my job back. It was no longer about clearing my reputation. Once Odessa and I understood how serious the situation was, we stopped acting on emotion and started acting carefully. Making accusations without proof would accomplish nothing. People like Celeste had money, influence, and powerful connections. If we wanted the truth to survive, every claim needed evidence behind it. I began reaching out to people who had once worked at the estate. Some ignored me at first. Others were nervous about speaking. A few agreed to meet only in private places. As trust slowly grew, stories began coming out. One former employee admitted she had been pressured to stay silent after questioning financial records. Another revealed that he had witnessed arguments involving missing paperwork years earlier. Several people shared experiences that sounded strangely similar to mine. Whenever someone got too close to sensitive information, their reputation suddenly suffered. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Odessa continued organizing records and timelines. Together we built a detailed picture of what had happened over the years. Then unexpected opportunities started appearing. People connected to Celeste became careless. A business associate saved copies of transactions. A former assistant kept old schedules and meeting notes. Documents that should have remained hidden found their way into our hands. Every new piece filled another gap. As months passed, the evidence became stronger. I filled notebooks with dates, names, and connections. Many nights I worked until sunrise reviewing paperwork. The process was exhausting, but I refused to quit. What kept me going was the thought of Stellan. He deserved the truth. He deserved protection. And he deserved a future that wasn't controlled by someone who saw him as an obstacle. Sometimes I imagined confronting Celeste immediately, but I always pushed that feeling aside. This wasn't about revenge fueled by anger anymore. It was about patience. The stronger our evidence became, the fewer places she had left to hide. For the first time since leaving the mansion, I felt hopeful. The truth was no longer scattered across rumors and missing files. It was slowly coming together, and when the time finally arrived, nobody would be able to explain it away. The opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. News spread that Ronan and Celeste were hosting a large engagement celebration at the estate. Important business partners, attorneys, family members, and longtime associates would all be there. Odessa and I knew this might be our only chance. Through one of the attorneys who had quietly reviewed part of our evidence, a private meeting was arranged before the main event began. I was nervous as I walked back into the mansion for the first time since being fired. Memories hit me immediately. But this time I wasn't there as an employee. I was there with the truth. Inside a conference room, several attorneys sat around a large table. Ronan was there too. Celeste looked completely confident. That confidence didn't last long. One by one, documents were placed on the table. Financial records, property transfers, company connections, missing paperwork that had suddenly reappeared, witness statements from former employees. Nobody interrupted. The room grew quieter with every page. I watched Ronan's expression slowly change from confusion to disbelief. Then came the evidence connecting multiple transactions to accounts linked to Celeste's network of companies. For the first time, she looked worried. But the most important moment came near the end. An independent digital expert presented findings about the security footage used against me. The video had been examined frame by frame. Sections had been altered. Key moments had been removed. The footage was not authentic. I felt my chest tighten as those words filled the room. For months, I had carried the pain of being called a thief. Now everyone finally knew the truth. Several attorneys immediately began asking Celeste difficult questions. Her answers became inconsistent. The calm, perfect image she had maintained for years started cracking apart. People who once supported her began looking at her differently. Nobody was smiling anymore. Nobody was celebrating. The engagement party waiting outside suddenly felt meaningless. As the evidence continued piling up, I realized something important. Celeste wasn't losing control of the situation. She had already lost it, and for the first time, there was nowhere left for her to run. The weeks that followed were filled with investigations, interviews, and legal reviews. What started as a few suspicious documents quickly became something much larger. Every time investigators examined another file, they discovered new problems. Financial records didn't match official reports. Signatures appeared on documents that people claimed they had never signed. Important paperwork had been altered multiple times. The deeper authorities looked, the more evidence they found. Soon, people who had worked closely with Celeste started protecting themselves. Some provided emails. Others handed over records they had kept hidden for years. A few even admitted they had stayed silent because they were afraid of losing their careers. Without their support, Celeste had nobody left to shield her. The woman who once seemed untouchable now spent most of her time answering questions she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Ronan looked like a completely different person. The confident man I had known inside the mansion seemed exhausted. One afternoon, he asked to meet with me privately. I wasn't sure I wanted to go. Part of me still remembered the humiliation of being accused, judged, and thrown out without a chance to defend myself. But I agreed. When I arrived, he looked down at the table for several moments before speaking. Then he apologized, not just for firing me, not just for believing the lies. He apologized for ignoring the warning signs that had been right in front of him. He admitted that he had failed Stellan. Hearing those words brought back painful memories. The apology didn't magically fix everything. The damage was real. The hurt was real. But for the first time, I felt that someone was finally taking responsibility. As I left that meeting, I realized how much had changed. Months earlier, I had been standing alone while everyone doubted me. Now the truth was standing on its own. It no longer needed defending. People could see it clearly. And with every passing day, it became obvious that justice was no longer a distant hope. It was finally getting closer. After the legal cases moved forward and the situation settled down, Ronan reached out to me again. This time, the conversation was very different. There were no accusations, no suspicion, no misunderstandings. He thanked me for everything I had done and offered me a generous financial settlement for the damage caused by the false accusations against me. He also offered me a permanent position helping care for Stellan. Most people thought my decision would be easy. They assumed I would immediately accept. But I didn't. The money would certainly help. The position was stable. Yet neither of those things solved the biggest problem. Trust had been broken. I needed time. For several months, I kept my distance while continuing occasional visits with Stellan. During those visits, I noticed changes in Ronan. He spent more time with his son. He attended appointments himself instead of sending employees. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Most importantly, he stopped making decisions based only on what others told him. Slowly, he started rebuilding relationships that had been damaged over the years. I could see he was genuinely trying. Meanwhile, every visit with Stellan became harder to leave. The little boy was growing fast. No matter how much time passed, he always ran to me with the same excitement. He wanted to show me his drawings, his books, and every new thing he learned. Sometimes he would ask if I was coming back for good. Those questions always touched my heart. One afternoon, while we were sitting together in the garden, he rested his head against my arm and said, "I miss you when you're not here." That simple sentence stayed with me. A few weeks later, I gave Rona my answer. I agreed to return. Not because of the salary, not because of the estate, not because of the influence attached to the Thorn name. I returned because somewhere along the way, that little boy had become family to me. And sometimes the strongest families are the ones people choose to build together. Years have passed since those events, but some memories remain as clear as if they happened yesterday. Life looks very different now. The chaos, investigations, and painful battles eventually came to an end. The estate became a much calmer place. The fear and tension that once filled every hallway slowly disappeared. Stellan is no longer the frightened little boy I first met. He grew into a kind, confident young man with a good heart. Watching him grow has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Ronan changed too. He learned difficult lessons from everything that happened. The mistakes he made can never be erased. But he worked hard to become a better father and a better person. As for me, I finally found something I had been missing for years. Peace. When I first arrived at the mansion, I carried so much pain. I was grieving my mother, struggling financially, and doubting my own value. I spent a long time believing that people only noticed my flaws. Then one small child looked at me differently. He didn't care about my appearance. He didn't care about my bank account. He didn't care about what other people thought. He simply trusted me. Looking back, that trust changed everything. Without it, the truth might have stayed buried forever. Without it, important secrets might never have been uncovered. Without it, an innocent child could have lost the future that rightfully belonged to him. People sometimes ask me if I feel satisfied knowing that Celeste lost everything she worked for. The truth is that I rarely think about her anymore. Real victory wasn't watching someone fall. Real victory was watching good people heal. It was seeing Stellan safe. It was seeing justice finally reach those who deserved it. And it was learning that my worth was never determined by the opinions of cruel people. The day I walked into that mansion, I believed I was there to clean rooms and earn a paycheck. I had no idea I was walking into a story that would change all of our lives. And it all began with one small kiss that nobody could explain, but none of us would ever forget.